Good evening, everyone. My name is Augustinas, and I don't even know where to begin because this journey was quite a long one. So I'm gonna start at the beginning. Um, my journey into AI started 3-4 years ago when I just graduated from mathematics in Queen Mary University of London, and I was just about to decide what I want to do next. Do I want to go work in the banking sector? Do I want to go open my startup, or do I want to get as much experience as possible? And what I decided to do was actually quite bold. I decided to go networking, and this was quite a journey on its own. Because throughout that, I met a lot of people who were actually working with AI back then, or at least claimed to be working with AI. And after meeting these people, I realized that AI is not just a buzzword, and there's a whole history behind it. And my math knowledge actually helped me a lot as well. And with that in mind, I decided to challenge myself, and I decided to make AI my hobby. On a day-to-day basis, I'm a CodeAcademy head of development, so I work with education. And during nighttime, I'm actually AI enthusiast. And with that in mind, I met Davidas a couple of months ago, and we decided to explore this topic even in more depth. So today I'm gonna walk you through a set of journeys and I would say successes I managed to find along the way. First of all, let's start with a definition. Is anybody brave enough to define it? Any brave souls here? AI. What is AI? Good, because there's no one explanation. There's no one definition. There's so many of them. Going from one to another, it's actually pretty weird doing this way. But anyway, actually there are a lot of definitions depending on your perspective and your relationship with AI. And even if you're like in a very formal way, you would see that everybody's trying to define it in a very general way. What it actually is, what does it actually do? And at the end of the day, it's it's very simple. It's the ability of the digital computer or computer-connected systems to perform human tasks. This is how I taught myself to look at it. Because at the end of the day, if we're talking artificial, we're thinking, okay, what is organic? Well, we're all organic, we're all human, we do amazing things, and we're trying to develop something more unique than us. To be fair, nothing is more unique than us at this point, and we're trying to develop it. And with this in mind, we can come to a very interesting point that a lot of different meetups, startups, and a lot of different people, depending on how they're being asked and how they feel at that time, they will give their own definition of what AI is. And to be fair, don't try to memorize any of the definitions. Try to make your own definition. Because at the end of the day, if you're looking at AI seriously and you want to develop something or you want to be taking part of it, you need to have a genuine interest and actual motivation to back yourself up. And for me, it was actually covering a lot of these words: learning, reasoning, problem solving, all of these things. And actually going as far as feeling. Because has anybody came across an AI which deals with feelings? Nobody.
Isn't that like sentiment analysis or something like that?
Yeah, it is very close to that. And it's very interesting because on day-to-day basis, we're actually being monitored and actually our feelings are being interpreted. And based on that, we're being suggested a lot of different goods. We're being suggested to buy one thing over another one. And without knowing, we're actually participating in this AI-connected environment, which we vaguely understand because we don't see it directly. Because from my journey back in the day, I was thinking, oh, AI is going to be the future where AI machine and robots are going to be taking the world and they're going to be assisting people and all of that. So we've probably all seen these kind of movies and we imagine that AI is just around the corner and we're going to have a bunch of robots assisting us from healthcare to education to banking sector and etc. etc. But at the end of the day, we're still very far from that. And with that in mind, I would like to say that this is the future we're talking about. And the future is not defined yet. We all heard about AI, we read a lot of articles, we watch a lot of blogs and all of the other things we do on our own time, but it's always talking about the future, what's going to come next. And it becomes very personal because every single one of us sees the future differently. For example, how many of you wants to open an AI related business? Raise your hands. Only few people, okay. How many people actually here are developers and want to develop an AI algorithm? a bit more. Okay, I'll assume everybody else has not decided yet. With this in mind, actually, it becomes very interesting because the future requires vision, but it requires imagination. And without that, no matter how good of a programmer you are, or a developer you are, or a business leader you are, it doesn't bring your product to life if you don't see where it is, what you want to develop. And I don't know who asked the question, what was your end goal? This is exactly what I'm talking about. You need to really define what you want to create. Even being here right now, you actually have a certain goal in your mind. Maybe some of you want to just learn about what's AI and what are we going to talk about, it was Vilnius School of AI, etc., etc. But for others, it might be a much broader sense. They would like to meet other like-minded people and they want to create a tribe. With this in mind, we're going into another definition of it. AI as a black box. And when I was studying mathematics, we came across a black box a lot of times. And it was always presented to us as a very simple definition of whatever happens in the black box is a mystery. It's a long development algorithm, a lot of mathematics, a lot of mystery happening in there, but at the end of the day, it produces the end goal you want to achieve. How that happens, what happens in the black box, well, I'm not going to go very deep into it, but I'm going to give a lot of different examples. Because throughout working in London with a lot of different startups, I came across a chatbot developing company, which was actually using a very unique approach to sell their product. Because how many of you have used the chatbot? All right, some of you. How many have tried to develop the chatbot? Not many. So everything relies on the data. If you're trying to develop a unique chatbot which can actually interact and you're not going to feel like you're talking to a robot, you need to really polish your edges. And that requires a lot of data. I cannot express how much data it requires. But at the end of the day, there was one startup which started off as a woman had a boyfriend, and they both been in a relationship for over 5 years or something. They've been always chatting on WhatsApp. And what happens, the boyfriend died. But naturally, the woman went into the sorrows and all of that, and then she started to miss the boyfriend. And then she decided, okay, wait, I'm working with chatbots. How about what happens if I use all the 5-year data set of us using our interaction with my fiance or whatever it happened to be at that time, and I create a chatbot which is going to interact and going to fulfill this emptiness, this void. And what happened? She actually created a chatbot which was based on her dead boyfriend's messages, and it was pretty good actually. And then sorry?
It's pretty sick.
It is a pretty sick idea. It is pretty sick. But the funny thing is, they used the same chatbot in a beta version with a lot of other people, and a lot of those people couldn't identify that it was a chatbot. Because the interactions they had were very genuine, very emotional, it was very human-like. Because a lot of what businesses are trying to do now, they're trying to predict how would you like to interact. And this is a very hard part, because in an instance you can identify if I'm making this stuff up or not. For example, there's a lot of other examples, but I'm going to try to cover it all. Simplicity versus complexity. This is another one. When I was studying in math, at the end of the day, what is mathematics? For me, it was a language. What is coding? It's a language. And the way you can look at it, you can very simplify anything and complexify the same thing as much as you want. How does that work? Basically, you can take any simple problem, and the more you zoom in, the more complex it becomes. The more it turns into a black box, and vice versa. When you're looking from a codeless perspective, I would suggest try to look at it as simple as possible. Because this way you will get a general gist of what is happening, how does it interact with the environment, and does it have any potential to actually take you to the goal. Well, that's just my advice. To take some examples, this is a data decision-making tree. Well, a pyramid, I would say. So how do you make a decision based on data? First of all, you need to have data, then you need to extract some sort of information, knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. With this in sense, how do you do that on an actual step-by-step basis? Well, data translates into symbols. Information translates into contextualized data, organized information, interpreted knowledge, and utilized understanding, which ultimately gives you to a completely different tree of direction. which basically can make you understand that as long as you have data, you can have insights. As long as you have insights, you can actually have a call to action method, which basically pretty much summarizes everything in a very simple idea. As long as you have data to solve a problem, you will just have to follow very simple steps. But these simple steps, the more you're going to zoom in, they're going to get more complex. Because at this point, I haven't even started going into coding. And I'm not going to even bother to do that. What happens next? Well, at the end of the day, once you have an action, you create more data, which is going to go back into the loop and give you more data, which you're going to have to analyze. And intelligence, as it says, is a goal-directed adaptive behavior. So technically, if you look at all of us, we all produce a lot of data, and we don't even know. We don't even track how much data we produce until something big happens. Has anybody heard about Cambridge Analytica?
Yep.
So do you know what happened there? And do you know that the red flags have been out there not just this year, not last year. It's been out there 3 years ago, 2 years ago if I'm correct. We've been 3 to 2 years basically. And it was very interesting because that was the time when a political scene was experiencing a lot of turbulence, a lot of innovation. Because suddenly Trump is going for presidency and suddenly he's getting a lot of support, but nobody understands who would vote for him. And all of that was actually generated by a very well-targeted data to the specific individuals. Because once I understand who you are as an individual, I can cluster you into a lot of different groups. And mathematically speaking, there's not an infinite amount of groups I can cluster you in. It's only a limited number of sets. And once I do that, I know exactly what one group likes, what another one experiences after doing a certain action, etc., etc. So once you start thinking in this way, you understand that AI is really backed by a lot of data. And the question is, where do I get the data? What do I do with the data? And all the other questions come along as well. But again, I'm not going to go into coding. And I'm just going to go a bit more into where we are now. And has anybody been following the European Commission and European news of the AI development? In that case, I will tell you that we're way behind. We're like the last people on Earth trying to develop AI in terms of the market size. And this brings us a lot of interesting ideas because we are at the edge of actually doing something great, but we're still trying to learn what are we supposed to do. And we do produce a lot of data. We do have skilled enough and knowledgeable people, but what's next? And there's a lot of research happening in automated labs, maps, machine generating, and all of these things. Amazing. But at the end of the day, what's the point of it? If all of us are not on the same page, all of us have different idea. Some of us want to develop a code, some of us want to actually create a startup, and we're all working as separated unit. And this is where I like what David says. You need to work as a tribe. And to work as a tribe, you need to really find and group yourself with people who are like-minded. And what my journey took me to was actually, I always wanted to be part of this AI movement. I really wanted to understand what's happening on day-to-day basis. And with that in mind, I actually, once I came back to Lithuania, one of my course mates from university, he opened the City AI group. And if nobody has heard about it, it's fine. But it's a meetup group around the world which unites over 50 cities worldwide. And that idea alone is worth something. Because imagine, there's like-minded people out there who are doing amazing things and you probably haven't heard about it. And once you have an amazing idea, you think, oh, this is the one. You realize that somebody already invented the wheel and you're trying to reinvent the bicycle. And it messes with your head a bit. And with that in mind, I decided to open a Vilnius.AI chapter purely just to gather like-minded people and share global knowledge. Because there's so much happening out there, and it's quite interesting how much we don't care. Because we have other things to care. We have day-to-day businesses. We have all the other things to work about. But at the end of the day, if we want to change something, the change starts with us and this is a different journey. But what does it leave it to AI? It doesn't leave much. And suddenly we have the opportunity. And for those who don't know, European Commission stated that they'll be investing even more funds into AI startups, into AI research, and suddenly the budgets for next 5 to 10 years actually will be increasing. And the question is, who will be working on those projects? And it's very likely that most of us, because at the end of the day, AI is gonna not take over you, but it's gonna find a way to integrate itself into your work environment. Because you're already working with pipe drives, you're working with time management tools, and all the other things, basically tools, which allow you to do your things faster, more efficient. And what's the whole point of AI, if you really think about it? What really motivated me was, I'm a lazy person. I really want to solve my problems in the easiest way. And if there's an AI which can actually solve specific problems, I can create a group of AIs and cluster it together to actually solve different problems. And that just gives you ideas to think about. So, with that in mind, let's take a look at some of the funding European Union already puts money to. And one of it is transportation, agriculture, yeah. And it's very funny because transportation is one of the examples we've seen actual results being done in China. Because China, on the other hand, is one of the leading AI development countries. And what happened in one of the cities, which is called Guangzhou, in 2016 they opened a whole city, they made a whole city into smart city, in the sense that all the data has been combined and has been used to improve the city's functionality. And one of the things they actually managed to improve was the transportation. They managed to reduce the amount people spent in traffic by 11% in one city only in over 2 years. And that technology, that model, they're actually using around the China. And that only makes you think, if you can actually reduce somebody's cost, you can actually make a lot of profit because you're saving a lot of money. Another example can be financial sector, marketing, education. Just think about any sector where you have interest, and you'll see a small advantage you can actually create by using an AI. The question is, does the sector have a data? And it all goes back to the previous examples I showed you before. And with that in mind, it's a very simple question. At the end of the day, when you have something in mind and you want to create something, you have to decide, am I going to be fully committing it, or am I just going to be on the sideline and just going to be passively watching it? And for me, for a long time, it was passively watching it until up to the point where I realized, okay, if I want to have a difference, make a difference, I have to do something. And this is where, again, Davida's mistakes come in, and you have to push yourself. To be honest, I hate speaking in front of people, and somehow this is my job now. And it's a very weird concept, because when it comes to AI, I have a lot to tell, but it's very hard to find the right words because I'm not coding. I have never wrote a code which would result in some sort of product. But I've spoken to so many people who actually created amazing products, and I know that all that knowledge, how I can simplify your ideas, which might be unique to you at this point, but I would be that bad person saying, why are you trying to reinvent something? There's this company which tried to do that and failed. There's this company which already tried to do that and they succeeded. Never reinvent the wheel. Try to learn from everybody's mistakes and try to get as close to knowledge as you can. So with that in mind, I can give you some questions to consider. If any of you are actually thinking to start an AI startup or develop a product, these are very simple, basic questions, but if you cannot answer them, I wouldn't advise going into this. And, well, you need to be very specific. Because when it comes to AI, everybody starts going into the future and thinking about all the amazing things AI can do, but at the end of the day, we're here right now, and we need to be thinking about niches. We need to think about niche solutions which we can apply and create with the data we already have. And a lot of people miss the steps. They start combining different data to create these combined solutions, but they never lead anywhere because at the end of the day they reach dead end because they're not viable. And there's a certain amount of steps you need to follow. And for me, I really want to participate in a startup environment working with AI. So just think what I did. I logically thought, okay, where's the most data I can get? Legal sector. Because there's a lot of legal documents floating around, and suddenly you can actually do something with it. And there's already a lot of startups which are trying to work and implement AI solutions into legal sector. And I'm not saying they're doing bad thing, but what I'm trying to say here, there's a lot of room for competition. And if you have a good idea and you have a good team, which I highly suggest finding around yourselves, try working on your ideas face to face, because it really challenges you to think outside your comfort zone. Because most of the time we have an idea, we think about it, it sounds good, and we pat ourselves on the shoulder and we move on with our lives. But then there's a lot of other people, they actually tell you, hey, this is not that good as you think. And then they challenge you constantly. So what happened, I gathered 4 developers and I gathered 4 lawyers into one room. What happened? Well, it was a very interesting conversation, which led to another meeting, which led to another meeting, and suddenly we're working on a very specific case where we're trying to develop a legal solution, AI solution for legal sector. I'm not going to go into details because I think it's going to be worth your time later on once I actually develop something with these people. But this is just an idea of what you could be striving on. And to summarize it, well, it all starts with building momentum. You all came here, it's on, what is it, Wednesday afternoon. Okay, what's next? You're going to go home, you're going to do something, and you're going to go move on with your lives. And this is just going to be one of those things you heard about, and you'll be able to tell your friends that, yeah, I heard about AI, I know what it's all about, and there's a new school opening in Vilnius, etc., etc. No, don't do that, because this is just a waste of your time. Try to think actions. What am I going to do next? And this is what David said previously. He learned a lot of mistakes by trying to do something. And in order to do something, he had to take action. And with this in mind, I'm just going to wrap it up, because I'm running out of words, and I have so many things I want to tell you, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask. Thank you. Yes. Questions, please.
Is David as one of the 4 developers?
Yes, this is how we met. Well, he's one of the developers, yes. We also have a natural language processing developer, one chatbot developer, and one programmer, and one developer who's just into it. And this is how it starts. You just need to find like-minded people who would share the vision, or at least would like to try their skills and test themselves. Any more questions?
Can you turn back to the slide where we need to think about these questions?
Yes.
Where does R&D fit in this?
Oh, R&D, well, I assume you did your R&D. That's one thing, but has somebody done something like this before? This is your R&D. Because if you already came up with an idea and you say this is it, make sure to back it up by saying there was somebody else who tried and they probably failed. And because this is 9 out of 10 times this was my case most of the time. I thought of an amazing idea, I started researching, and I find that somebody else did it and it didn't work out. So this is the second stage.
But if someone didn't work out, that's a success story for you.
Not necessarily. Because now you need to find details why it didn't work out.
Exactly. If you figure out
It is.
their
In
problem,
that sense,
it's
it
your
is a success story. But it's a very small success.
Potato for that.
Might be. Any more questions?
So what's your end point? The same question.
My end point being, you're here already. Look how many people are here. And all of you are actually interested. You didn't come here just because there was nothing else to do this evening. And you want to learn something. And to be fair, the best way to learn is not by listening to other people, but by asking the specific questions about their experience, what they've done. Because this goes back to the second point. I learn most of my things not by going to meetings, but actually waiting outside and talking to people and asking why it didn't work out. What worked out? Where did you start? What team did you assemble first? What was your biggest challenge? How did you communicate with? Because these are developers and non-developers, and then you have business people in the middle. And there are a lot of questions you can ask here. So my take on this, the journey into the Codeless AI starts with a lot of questions. And you need to be ready to ask a lot of questions. That's what I'm going for. And the best way to do it is literally here, because you have a lot of other people who will be able to answer. I might not be able to answer a lot of questions as well, but some of the people here will.
I think it's not about the raising the question. It's having a problem which needs to be solved in this particular case. Because i.e., well, in general, it might not take over the world in next 50 years until I die. But at some point, some of you've seen the Westworld or something. So I do imagine this can happen at the end point. So until we have problems to solve or questions to raise, probably the same. Thank you.
All right. Any more questions?
Can we go back to transportation and agriculture slide?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's. I just took a notice that on the transportation part, well, yeah, it's more. Okay, sensors are also. It's a bit different types of AI usage.
I can give you another example actually on transportation, because the same friend who introduced me to City AI Group, he was from Romania and he was working with agriculture. This was his first startup he started doing with agriculture. And they used drones to actually go and map the farming lands and see where the crop was actually going nicely and where it was slacking off. And then they used all this data to feed into AI, and then they were solving different problems on their own. So again, think about combining different expertise to solve specific problems which you feel sensitive to. And it sounds very easy, but when you actually go down to it, this is where it gets hard, because you'll meet other people who will say, no, it shouldn't be working like this. But that's another thing. Any more questions? Yes.
From your own experience, how many of the problems is solved by AI? What is the success rate? Because you're talking about that a lot of them are just not possible to solve. What is the success rate?
Again, we would have to determine what we measure as success, because I would define that we're on the right path. There's a lot of investment flowing into a lot of startups in China, in US, and now finally Europe. And all of these startups are working on very niche solutions, which ultimately working with the similar data. And the success is that we're finally learning how to use data correctly to actually learn from it. Because, again, as I showed before, it's a loop. You need to learn from the data to improve your models and apply your models to the general public to see if it works. And so this is one of the successes. But going in a slightly longer term, I believe that the biggest success will be collaboration between different data sets and different AI technologies, because they will alone create a unique data sets for data, which will create steps for new AI and etc. etc.
Last question.
Yes. Yes, last question.
You said you are in AI for 4 years. Can you share your, I don't know, 2 projects that you are proud of?
When I said 2 years, I mentioned as a hobby. I've never developed, as I mentioned before, I've never developed any projects, and this is where I find it very interesting to note that all of you will probably have, all of you have your own hobbies. The question is, how do you take your hobby to the next level? How do you push yourself to make hobby your life? That's an interesting question, and this is where the interesting part for me. Well, I opened the Vilnius.AI group. I met a lot of interesting people. I started talking to a global community where I met countless amount of people who are actually working on real projects. And when you follow the news, you see just the headlines, but you never understand the logic and the struggle we had to go through. And in my perspective, that was my success.
But what's the point, being interested in if you're not developing yourself?
Because it's learning. Because it's all about
so you're
learning.
Getting ready to
oh yes,
for your own project sometime in the future?
As I mentioned, for example, the legal AI is one of the projects I'm currently developing, and it is pretty interesting because I get to apply a lot of knowledge I managed to gather over years with a certain amount of people to see what internal challenges we will experience. And that's, again, it's a learning on its own. So yeah. Okay, with that in mind,
Gets a big hand for you.
thank you.